It's fair to say that the Sony PlayStation dominated the console market back in the mid to late 90s. Certainly from my experience in the UK, everybody at school seemed to have one. Everybody except me. You see, the Sega Mega Drive, or Genesis to my American viewers, had provided me with countless hours of entertainment in the previous console generation, and introduced me to what had already become my favorite characters of all time. As a result, there was no way in hell that I was going to turn my back on Sega and jump ship to the PlayStation, despite loads of peer pressure from my mates, and an impressive looking lineup of Sony exclusive games that were secretly catching my eye. So, in the Christmas of 1995, while so many of my friends went with Sony's first console, I opted for Sega's brand new machine instead, the Saturn. As a result of this decision, light-hearted digs were frequently directed at me for the next few years. For example, I was often mocked for my console's inability to produce transparencies, the poor visuals on some of the games when compared with the PlayStation counterparts, and an alleged lack of Saturn titles that could rival the huge PlayStation exclusives such as Final Fantasy VII or Crash Bandicoot. But I had no regrets with my purchase, and during the life of the system, I sank countless hours into the likes of Dark Savior, Virtua Cop 2, Fighters Megamix, Sega Rally, Burning Rangers, Die Hard Arcade, and many more Saturn exclusives. I loved it. Bizarrely, however, I'm ashamed to say there was one huge Saturn exclusive missing from my collection, and that game was NiGHTS Into Dreams. I know what you're thinking, and you're right. Who on earth owned a Saturn and didn't have NiGHTS? This bozo right here. It was the game that was being touted as the flagship title for the Saturn at the time, one that showed off the Saturn's graphical capabilities better than any other. And it was from the developers of my favorite video game series. I am, of course, talking about Sonic Team. The build-up and hype for the game in magazines at the time was massive, and when it finally released in the autumn of 1996, it was met with rave reviews. So why wasn't NiGHTS Into Dreams at the top of my Christmas list in 1996? And why did it never make its way into my collection? I played the demo a lot back in the day, and I really liked it for what it was. But I think what it ultimately boiled down to was a lack of appeal when it came to the characters and the setting of the game. Meaning there was always another release that looked cooler to me, that would always take priority over NiGHTS whenever I was getting a new game. After all, Sonic Team's previous games had been all about a cool character with attitude. Sonic Team had made me crave this coolness. In stark contrast, this new game was about two kids who have a kit, enter a dream world, and fuse with a flying acrobat in a jester's hat. It just didn't have the same appeal. Anyway, that was 1996, and here we are in 2023. And in this video, I want to ask the question, was I a dope? Let's find out as I beat NiGHTS Into Dreams for the very first time. My thoughts will follow.
BRB.
Okay, I just beat NiGHTS Into Dreams, the remastered version specifically, which was released on the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 in 2012. To give the old game a fair shot, I ended up opting to use the widescreen remastered option, rather than the 4x3 Saturn mode, which is also included in this version. I just felt it would be best to experience the most modern version that existed in this year, 2023. Let's get into it. From what I can tell from some text in the menus and a couple of cutscenes, the story of NiGHTS centers on two kids with some insecurities. Claris, who wants to be a singer, and Elliot, who wants to be a basketball player. Meanwhile, it's all kicking off in a dreamland called NiGHTopia. It is here that some sort of nightmare monster wizard thing called Wiseman the Wicked is trying to steal dream energy with the help from his minions, the game's bosses called Nightmaren. They're doing this so that Wiseman can take over NiGHTopia and eventually escape into the real waking world. And take over that too. Oh no! Luckily, our insecure protagonists Claris and Elliot possess a special energy, so they are able to roam free in their dreams and battle the evil monster and his minions with the help of NiGHTS, a genderless acrobatic jester thingy which they seem to turn into or fuse with. I'm not quite sure. Anyway, that's the gist. 2 kids and a flying jester fight nightmares. So what of the game itself? Well, the basic gameplay loop for NiGHTS is this. You enter a dream world as your chosen child and head towards an altar thingy. You then get mugged by a group of creatures who steal orbs from you, and this happens every time you start a stage. These kids just don't learn. It was the 90s. They were probably distracted thinking about Pokemon cards and/or trying to remember if they fed their Tamagotchi before bed. Anyway, to get these orbs back, you must head to the altar, turn into NiGHTS, and fly around collecting different orbs to destroy these container things to get the original orbs back that were nicked from you at the start of the level. There are 4 containers to destroy on each stage, and each one takes you on a different set 2D route around the map. Stages are timed and ranked from A to E based on your performance, with your score boosted based on speed, items collected, and aerial acrobatics performed. The controls are simple and it's a pretty relaxing game, which is apt considering it's about dreaming. Pulling off tricks and chaining together loops is a lot of fun, and the timer adds a mild urgency to the proceedings. But nothing too much, as outside of the final 2 stages, running out of time will just cause you to turn back into a human child, which means you'll have to run back to the altar on foot while being chased by an alarm clock. It's mild peril at most. The different themed courses all have their own gimmicks too, which can see you sledging down a snowy mountain, being whizzed around the map on a metal rail, or having NiGHTS transform into a mermaid for a 3D underwater section. These bits were all great surprises when they occurred, and helped each level stand apart on its own. It may sound silly, but I found them genuinely thrilling when these moments came about out of the blue. The only negative for me gameplay-wise was that this game falls into the same trap that some of the other Sonic games have over the years. In that, you are going too fast and can't see what's coming up ahead of you, especially in the original 4:3 Saturn aspect ratio. As a result, a lot of your performance comes down to luck and hoping for the best, at least until you learn the layout of the courses. Also, should you run out of time and turn back into a kid, the camera is just not fit for purpose, and can't really be moved, probably due to the limited inputs on the Saturn's controller back in the day. It's very frustrating though. You can't see where the hell you're going, but with no enemies you can just follow the arrow and jump around, and chances are you will eventually find your destination, providing the clock doesn't get you first. The only other part of the game are 7 nightmare sections where you fight the Nightmare bosses. Each of these are pretty unique and can be quite a visual spectacle considering this game is almost 30 years old. The enemy designs are cool, as are the colourful battle arenas they inhabit. Unfortunately, it's not always clear what you're supposed to be doing while fighting these things, and I seem to defeat several of them by pure luck after sort of flying around and spinning into them randomly. Most of them were pretty fun though. NiGHTS Into Dreams has exactly the kind of fantastic soundtrack you'd expect from a Sonic Team game, combining uplifting, happy tracks in the dream worlds with darker, more, intense tracks for the Nightmare bosses. It's a wonderful soundtrack, and one that I definitely recommend checking out. Now let's talk about the visuals, starting with the original Saturn version. NiGHTS, by 1996 standards, is a really nice looking game. Definitely one of the best looking on the system. It's bright and colourful, and the nightmare bosses, some of which are pretty huge, make for some really memorable, if brief, fights. The contrast between the upbeat dream stages and the warped, cartoonish nightmares from the perspective of a child-style boss areas is very cool, and I really like the art style in this game. The 2012 widescreen version that I played through is what I'd call a modest remaster. It obviously improves the visuals, but while still staying very faithful to the original version. In terms of length, NiGHTS is not a long game, I'd say I beat the whole thing, which consists of 4 levels for Claris and 4 for Elliot, in just over 2 hours. Little did I realize when I used to play the 2-level demo back in the day that I was actually beating 25% of the full game. But the replayability comes from trying to hit that A rank on each of the stages. Something which, based on my rankings on my first playthrough, seems like it'd be pretty challenging. I mean, look at my scores here. This screen is giving me flashbacks to my GCSE results day. There are also leaderboards should you want to replay the levels over and over to beat your high score. So, let's get back to my original question. Was I a dope for not having Nights into Dreams in my Sega Saturn games library? Yes. Although short, this is a fun, stylish action game with plenty of replayability. With great graphics and a cool art style, memorable bosses and a wonderful soundtrack, this is a game that I surely would have played over and over had it have been in my collection back in the day. I really missed out on this one. Playing it in 2023, Nights has aged for sure. The camera is awkward and the bosses can sometimes be confusing, but I still had a great time with it. It has now joined the likes of Grim Fandango in my games I missed at the time but have now played and really enjoyed, so now revisit frequently list. I need a better name for that list. Anyway, Nights is great. Thank you so much for watching. Have you played Nights into Dreams? Was it during the Saturn era or on one of the re-releases since then? What did you think of it? Probably unsurprisingly, I haven't played the Nintendo Wii sequel either. Is that worth checking out? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button as it helps me out a lot. And if you're new here, consider subscribing for frequent, high-quality, evergreen Sonic and Sega videos. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you next time.